The snow had been falling since before sunrise, thick and quiet, covering the streets like a blanket that made everything look peaceful, even though it was not. The air was sharp and cold, the kind that burns the lungs when someone breathes too deeply. Cars passed by slowly, their tires crunching over ice, headlights glowing through the white blur. People walked fast, heads down, hands buried deep in their pockets, thinking about warmth, about home, about themselves. Near an old bus stop, with cracked glass and faded signs, a small figure stood very still. She was just a child, no more than 10 years old, wearing a thin jacket that had once belonged to someone bigger. The zipper was broken, so she held the front closed with one hand. With the other arm, she wrapped herself tightly around a smaller child, pressing him against her chest, as if her body alone could protect him from the cold. Her shoes were too big, heels worn down, letting snow seep inside, with every small movement. Her fingers were red and stiff, her face pale, but her eyes were alert. She did not cry. She did not shout. She simply stood there. Holding on, the smaller child's head rested under her chin. His face was hidden in her jacket, and his body felt lighter than it should have. She shifted her weight gently from one foot to the other, afraid that if she stopped moving, the cold would take over completely. Every few minutes, she leaned down and whispered to him, though her lips trembled so much that the words almost disappeared into the wind. Around her, life went on. A man walked past carrying a coffee cup, the steam rising warmly into the air. He glanced at the children and frowned, then looked away. A woman hurried by, talking on her phone, stepping around the growing pile of snow near the curb. A bus drove past without stopping. No one asked questions. No one slowed down for long. The girl watched them all carefully. Each face that passed was a small chance, a quiet hope that someone would stop. Each time they didn't, something inside her tightened. But she refused to show it. She had learned a long time ago that crying did not help. The cold reached places she did not know could hurt. Her legs shook slightly, and she pressed her knees together so the smaller child would not notice. She focused on counting her breaths instead. In, out, in, out. If she could keep herself calm, she could keep him calm too. But the smaller child had gone too quiet. At first she thought he was sleeping. That would be normal. He often slept when he was tired or scared. She rested her cheek against his head, feeling his hair damp from melting snow. She waited for the rise and fall of his breathing, for some small movement that would tell her everything was still okay. Seconds passed. Then more. Her heart began to race. She pulled back just enough to look at his face. His eyes were closed, his lips slightly blue. She spoke his name softly, then a bit louder, then louder still. The wind carried her voice away, leaving her words thin and weak in the open air. He did not answer. Panic crept in, slow and heavy. She tightened her grip, rubbing his arms through her gloves, trying to warm him the way she always did. Her own hands hurt so badly that each movement felt like needles pressed into her skin. But she didn't stop. "Stay with me," she whispered, even though she wasn't sure he could hear her. "We're okay. We just have to wait a little longer." She did not know who she was waiting for. She only knew she could not go anywhere else. The bus stop had been her idea. It was public. People came and went. Someone would notice two children standing alone in the snow, she told herself. Someone would ask questions before it got too cold. She straightened her back and held the smaller child higher. Even though her arms were shaking now, her breath came out in short clouds. Her lips were dry and cracked, and when she swallowed, her throat burned. Another car slowed down nearby, turning the corner with care. For a moment, she thought it might stop. She lifted her head slightly, hope flashing across her face like a spark. The car passed. She lowered her gaze again. Biting down on her lips so hard she tasted blood, the world felt very big all of a sudden. And she felt very small inside it. Snow began to fall harder, thick flakes drifting down and settling on her hair, her shoulders, the smaller child's back. She brushed some of it away, afraid it would make him colder. But it kept coming. She started to feel dizzy. The ground beneath, her feet seemed to move, even though she knew it wasn't. Her vision blurred at the edges, and she blinked fast, forcing herself to stay focused. She could not sit down. She could not fall. If she fell, she might drop him. That thought alone was enough to keep her upright. She remembered other cold days. Nights spent counting stars through broken windows. Mornings when her hands shook so badly she could not hold a spoon. She had survived those times by staying alert, by staying strong. This was just another hour. Another test. Still, fear pressed against her chest like a weight. A loud laugh echoed from across the street as two people stepped out of a shop, warm bags in their hands. Warm. That word felt almost unreal now. She tried to remember what it felt like. She looked down at the smaller child again and brushed his cheek gently with her thumb. His skin felt colder than before. "Please," she whispered to no one in particular. Her knees buckled slightly, and she had to lean against the metal pole of the bus stop to keep from falling. The cold metal burned through her jacket, but she welcomed the pain if it meant staying awake. Time slowed. Each second dragged. Then, across the street, something changed. A large black car eased to the side of the road and paused. Its engine continued to run, quiet and steady, sending faint clouds of warmth into the freezing air. The girl noticed it without really understanding why. She lifted her head again, her eyes drawn to it like a magnet. The car did not move. Inside, someone was watching. She did not know who. She did not know what that person was thinking. All she knew was that the car was still there. And for the first time that morning, she was not completely invisible. She tightened her arms around the smaller child and stood as straight as she could, snow soaking into her clothes, heart pounding in her ears. She met the dark glass with a tired, steady look, too exhausted to pretend she wasn't scared. The cold continued to bite. The city continued to move, but in that brief, fragile moment between breath and breath, everything balanced on one silent decision yet to be made. The memory of that morning did not begin with snow. For the girl, it began long before, in quieter moments that never felt safe. She had learned early that silence could be dangerous, that empty rooms could feel louder than shouting. Life had not fallen apart all at once. It had cracked slowly, like ice spreading across water. There was a time when they had a proper home. Not a big one, not a perfect one, but warm enough. She remembered a small kitchen where light came in through the window in the afternoon. She remembered sitting on the floor, helping the smaller child stack old plastic cups into towers, laughing when they fell. Those memories had edges softened by time, but the feeling of warmth stayed clear. Then things changed. At first, it was little things. Fewer groceries. Late nights filled with quiet arguments she pretended not to hear. Doors closing too hard. Promises spoken with tired voices. She learned to distract the smaller child, turning fear into games, turning worry into stories whispered under blankets when the adults disappeared from their daily lives. It happened faster than she understood. One day there were unanswered phone calls. The next, they were alone more often than not. She told herself it was temporary. Everything had been temporary before, but days turned into weeks. She learned how to make simple meals. She learned to stretch food until it almost disappeared. She learned which neighbors looked away and which ones asked too many questions. She learned to smile and say they were fine. The smaller child trusted her completely. That trust felt heavier than anything she had ever carried. Every choice she made felt important. Every mistake felt dangerous. When the cold first arrived, she tried to prepare. She blocked drafts with old towels. She saved small pieces of cardboard to place inside shoes. She counted the blankets each night, decided who needed them more. She always decided the smaller child came first. One night, the heat stopped working. At first, she thought it would come back on its own. Machines always fix themselves before, at least in her experience. But the air grew colder, and the pipes made strange sounds. She wrapped the smaller child in every blanket she could find and held him until her arms went numb. By morning, she knew they could not stay. Leaving was terrifying. Staying felt worse. She packed what she could carry in a small bag. An extra shirt. A half-empty bottle of water. a piece of bread wrapped carefully in paper. She helped the smaller child put on his shoes and tied the laces twice so they would not come undone. Outside, winter had taken over the city. The cold slapped her face the moment they stepped out. She locked the door behind them, even though she was not sure why. Maybe it was habit. Maybe it was hope. They walked for hours, stopping often so the smaller child could rest. She talked constantly, afraid that if she stopped talking, fear would grow louder. She pointed out shops, trees, clouds, anything that could distract him from the cold. By the time they reached the bus stop, her legs felt weak. Her stomach ached with hunger. But the bus stop felt like a place where people came and went, where someone had to notice them eventually. As she stood there holding him, her mind kept replaying every choice she had made. She wondered if she should have knocked on more doors. If she should have trusted someone she didn't know. If she had waited too long, the guilt hurt worse than the cold. When the black car stopped across the street, she did not recognize what it meant. She had learned not to expect much from strangers. Still, the stillness of the car felt different from the rush of everything else. It lingered inside the car. The man who watched was not meant to be there. His morning had begun in comfort, wrapped in routine and quiet control. Heated seats, a warm coat resting beside him, a schedule planned down to the minute. He was used to observing the world through glass, distant and separate. At first, he thought the children might be waiting for someone. That thought made it easier to keep sitting, easier to stay warm. Then he noticed the girl's shoes, then the way she held the smaller child. Not like a sister playing games, but like someone protecting something fragile. The way her shoulders curved inward, forming a shield. The way she did not ask for attention, but seemed ready if it came. Something uncomfortable settled in his chest. He had seen poverty before. From afar, in reports and pictures and brief encounters arranged by others, this felt closer, realer, harder to ignore. He checked his watch. He was already running late. Important people would be waiting. Contracts, decisions, numbers that mattered to many, he told himself. Someone else would help. That was when he saw the girl's knees buckle. She caught herself just in time. Leaning against the metal pole, her face tightening in pain she tried to hide, the smaller child slipped slightly in her arms, and she adjusted him with careful movements that showed practice. The man's hand tightened around his phone. He remembered a different cold morning. Many years ago, standing outside a building that did not feel like home yet. He remembered hunger that made thinking slow. He remembered how it felt to be seen once, unexpectedly, by someone who chose not to look away. The memory surprised him. He rolled the window down just a little. Cold air rushed in, sharp and clear, breaking through the comfort of the car. He studied the girl again. Their eyes met briefly, and the look she gave him was not a plea. It was steady, tired, honest. That look followed him when he rolled the window back up. The driver shifted in his seat, waiting for instruction. Seconds passed. Snow continued to fall. Finally, the man spoke, his voice quieter than usual. He asked how long they had been standing there. The driver answered softly, unsure. Across the street, the girl's arms began to tremble harder. She bent her head toward the smaller child, whispering words the man could not hear. The choice pressed in on him, heavy and uncomfortable. He could stay. He could leave. Both were easy in their own way. He took a breath and opened the door. Cold rushed in immediately, biting through his coat as he stepped onto the street. For the first time that morning, he felt the weather the way everyone else did. Traffic moved around him. Snow crunched under his shoes. He crossed the road carefully, aware that every step was carrying him closer to something that might change his day, his plans, maybe more. The girl watched him approach, her body stiffed with caution. She did not step back. She did not step forward. She simply waited. He stopped a few feet away, close enough to see the color of her lips, the dark circles under her eyes. The way her hands shook, despite her effort to stay steady. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then gently, he asked if they were okay. The question hung between them, simple but loaded. Waiting for an answer that would open a door neither of them could close again. The girl did not answer right away. The question felt too big, too strange after so many hours of silence. She looked at the man standing in front of her, his shoes clean, his coat thick, his breath calm. People like him usually pass by. They did not stop and ask questions. She tightened her arms around the smaller child without meaning to. Her shoulders rose slightly, ready to defend what little she had. Her eyes searched the man's face, not for kindness, but for truth. "We're fine," she said at last. Her voice was small but steady. The man did not nod and walk away like others had. He didn't smile politely or offer empty words. He looked past her answer, down at the smaller child, then back at her again. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. She shook her head. Time felt strange now. "Not long," she said, even though she knew it wasn't true. The man noticed the way her knees trembled. He noticed how her fingers stayed clenched, refusing to relax even for a second. He could feel the cold deep in his own hands already. He had only been outside for a moment. "You look tired," he said quietly. That did something to her. Not the words themselves, but the tone. No one had said that to her before without asking something in return. Her throat tightened. She looked away first. The smaller child stirred slightly, his head rolling against her shoulder. She adjusted him again, her movements careful and practiced. When she spoke next, her voice was lower. "He needs to be warm," she said. The man nodded. "I agree." He glanced back toward the car, then at his watch. He slipped the watch into his coat pocket, as if removing it from view might remove its power over him. "Can I help you find a warm place?" he asked. Her heart began to pound faster. Help was dangerous. Help came with questions. Questions led to doors she was not sure she wanted opened. She had always believed that staying invisible was safer. "We're waiting for someone," she said quickly. "For who?" She hesitated too long. The man didn't press her. Instead, he took off his gloves and held out one hand, palm up, not touching her, not reaching for the child. "Just offering, your hands are shaking," he said. "That's not safe in this weather." She looked at his bare hand. It was already turning red from the cold. People like him didn't do that. They didn't give up comfort for strangers. "I can't," she whispered. "I have to hold him." "I understand," he said. For a moment, they both just stood there. Snow fell between them, landing on their coats, their hair, the ground. The city noise felt far away, like it belonged to another world. The smaller child made a weak sound, almost like a sigh. The girl froze. She bent her head close to his face, her breath quickening. "Stay awake," she whispered. "Please." The man saw her panic clearly now. He stepped closer, keeping his movement slow. "I'm calling for help," he said. "No," she said at once. Her voice had an edge it didn't have before. Fear sharpened it. She backed away half a step, pressing herself closer to the bus stop pole. "We don't need it," she said. "We're okay." They stopped immediately. "All right," he said. "I won't do anything without telling you first." It mattered more than he knew. The wind picked up, pushing snow against their legs. The girl's teeth chattered now, even though she tried to stop it. She closed her eyes for a second, too afraid to let herself sway. The man took off his coat. Before she could react, he stepped back a little and held it out. "Wrap him in this," he said. "It's warmer than what he has." She stared at the coat as if it were something fragile. Accepting it felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. "If I give this to you," he continued, "I'll be cold too. So we'll both be in this together." That sentence broke through her wall, slowly, carefully. She shifted the smaller child just enough to wrap the coat around him. The fabric was heavy, warm, smelling faintly of clean soap. The moment it touched his skin, his body relaxed slightly. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "Thank you," she said, the words barely audible. The man pulled his own sleeves down over his hands and rubbed them together. The cold rushed in hard now, biting his arms, reminding him of where he was and what he was doing. "Can you tell me where you were going?" he asked gently. She swallowed. "Nowhere." That was the truth. He nodded as if that answer made sense. Then let's go somewhere together, he said. She looked up at him. Why? He paused. Honest answers mattered here, because children shouldn't be standing in the snow this long, he said. And because walking away would stay with me longer than the cold? She studied him again. Not as a stranger, but as a person. Her instincts, sharpened by years of watching adults carefully, told her he was serious. Her legs gave a small shake. I can't carry him much longer. She admitted. Then let me help carry him, the man said. No, she said quickly. He nodded again. Okay, then I'll walk beside you. That way if you fall, you won't fall alone. Something about that felt safe. They moved slowly toward the car. Each step felt uncertain, like the world might shift under her feet at any moment. The man stayed close, but not too close. Matching her pace, the driver stepped out and opened the back door at once. Alarm written across his face when he saw the children. Inside the car, warmth poured out like a wave. The girl hesitated at the door. Entering felt like stepping into another life, one she didn't belong in. The man crouched down slightly so they were closer to eye level. You're in charge, he said. We won't go anywhere you don't agree to. She took a breath, then another. My brother is cold, she said. He needs help, the man replied. And you do too. She stepped inside. The warmth hit her so fast it made her dizzy. Her hands began to ache as feeling returned, sharp and painful. She hissed softly, holding the smaller child closer as he stirred again. The man closed the door and climbed in after her. The driver started the car, pulling away from the curb carefully. For the first time all day, the girl allowed herself to sit. Her body shook now, exhaustion flooding in. She leaned her head back against the seat, keeping one arm around the smaller child, afraid that letting go even a little would undo everything. The man handed her a bottle of water. Small sips, he said. She hesitated, then obeyed. The water was cool and clean, sliding down her throat like relief. Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere warm and safe, he said, where professionals can check on him. Fear flickered in her chest, but it was weaker now, mixed with something else she wasn't used to. Trust. Outside the window, the city blurred past, snowy and gray. Inside the car, the world felt quieter. The girl looked down at the smaller child's face. His lips were already less blue. He shifted slightly, curling toward warmth. She closed her eyes for just a moment. The man watched her carefully, realizing how close she was to collapsing once the danger passed. He said nothing, letting silence do its gentle work. Ahead of them, the road stretched on, leading away from that bus stop, away from the cold morning that had nearly broken something fragile and precious. Whatever came next would not be easy, but they were moving now, and sometimes that was enough to change everything. The warmth of the building wrapped around them the moment the doors opened. It was the kind of warmth that felt unreal after hours in the cold, so heavy it made the girl lightheaded. Her ears rang softly, and she had to blink several times to make sense of the bright lights and clean floors beneath her feet. People moved with purpose inside. Voices calm but quick, hands ready to help. Someone brought blankets. Someone else kneeled to look at the smaller child's face. The girl stayed close, her arms still locked around him, afraid that if she loosened her grip, everything would disappear. He's with me, she said at once when someone reached out. The man stepped in gently. She's been caring for him, he said. Please let her stay. The girl glanced at him, surprised. He met her eyes and gave the slightest nod, as if to say she was not wrong to protect what she had carried this far. They let her stay, eh? Room filled with soft light replaced the loud open space. The door closed, muting the sounds of the outside world. Someone checked the smaller child carefully, speaking in words the girl only half understood. She watched every movement closely, memorizing faces, ready to react if anything felt wrong. Hypothermia, a calm voice said, not unkindly. Mild to moderate. We caught it in time. The girl barely understood the word, but she understood the relief in the tone. They placed the smaller child on a bed and wrapped him in heated blankets. The girl stood beside him, her hands hovering unsurely until someone nodded that it was all right for her to touch him. Only then did she let herself breathe. The man stayed in the corner, quiet and observant. He made a phone call, his voice low, giving short instructions. The girl noticed how quickly things seemed to happen when he spoke. Doors opened. Answers came faster. It made her uneasy and grateful at the same time. Her own body began to shake now that the danger had eased. It came in waves, deep shivers she couldn't control. Someone noticed and guided her to a chair. Wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, she resisted at first, then let herself sink down. Exhaustion pulling her heavy. "Drink this," gentle voice said. She held the warm cup with both hands, the heat almost painful. She took careful sips, like she had been told, with every swallow. The tight band around her chest loosened just a little when the smaller child opened his eyes. She cried before she could stop herself. He was groggy, confused, but alive. He reached for her weakly, and she leaned forward at once, pressing her forehead to his. The tears came silently, soaking into the blanket. "It's okay now," she whispered, not fully believing it, but wanting to. The hours that followed blurred together. Time moved strangely inside that room. People came and went. Papers were brought in. Questions were asked. "Do you have an adult we can call?" Someone asked carefully. The girl shook her head. "Any family at all?" She swallowed. "It's just us." There was no judgment in the silence that followed, only concern. The man listened from the side, his brows pulled together. For the first time, the shape of what the children had been carrying alone began to fully settle on him later. When the smaller child fell asleep again, steadier this time, the girl slumped back in her chair. Her head lolled slightly, and she jerked awake, embarrassed. "You can rest," the man said quietly. "I'll be right here." She studied him for a moment, measuring his words. Adults had promised things before. Promises had a way of breaking. Still, her eyes closed. When she awoke, the room was dimmer. Someone had adjusted the lights. The smaller child was still asleep, his breathing slow and even. Panic surged through her until she noticed his chest rise and fall. She exhaled. The man was still there, seated nearby, jacket folded over his arm now, sleeves pushed up. He looked older, without the distance of the street. Lines of worry clear on his face. "You didn't leave," she said. "No," he replied. "I said I wouldn't." She nodded, accepting that. "What happens now?" she asked. He did not answer right away. "I want to make sure you're both safe tonight," he said carefully. "Not just warm for a few hours." Her fingers tightened on the edge of the blanket. "We can't stay here. This place isn't the plan," he said. "It's a step." She didn't like steps that she couldn't see the end of. Social workers arrived later, calm and patient. They spoke directly to the girl, not over her head. They asked about school, about food, about how long it had been just the two of them. She answered honestly, even when it was hard. The man watched quietly as she did. Every answer added weight to something settling deep inside him. When the question of temporary care came up, the girl stiffened. "We're not being separated," she said at once. "No," one woman said gently. "Not if we can help it." The girl glanced at the man, fear flickering. He stepped forward. "I won't allow that," he said simply. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it was firm. The room grew very quiet. The woman regarded him carefully, then nodded. "All right. We'll discuss options." Later that night, the man spoke with officials in a hallway, his voice calm but determined. The girl could hear bits and pieces, not words, but tone. It was the sound of someone used to being listened to. Using that power carefully, eventually he returned. "There's a place you can stay," he said. "Clean, warm, together." She searched his face. "For how long?" "As long as it takes to find the right solution," he replied. She considered that. No one had ever offered time without limits before. The ride there was quiet. The smaller child slept the entire way, bundled in blankets. The girl watched lights pass by the window, a reflection pale and tired. The place they arrived at was quiet and warm, with soft lighting and rooms that smelled clean. It felt strange stepping inside somewhere that didn't feel temporary. Even if she didn't fully trust it yet, she insisted on putting the smaller child to bed herself. She watched him fall asleep again, safer this time. When she finally sat down, the weight of the day pressed down hard. The man stood near the doorway. "I'll check on you in the morning," he said. She hesitated, then spoke. "Why are you doing this?" He thought for a moment. "Because I almost didn't stop," he said honestly, "and I don't want that to be the story." She nodded slowly. After he left, she lay awake for a long time, listening to the quiet. It felt different from the silence she knew. This silence felt like space, not danger. In another part of the city, the man sat alone, hands clasped, staring at nothing. The day replayed itself in his mind, moment by moment. Especially the way the girl had stood in the snow. Refusing to let go, he realized something uncomfortable and important. Walking away would have been easy. Staying meant responsibility, and for the first time in a long time. He knew exactly which one he was choosing. Morning came softly. Light filtered through the curtains. Pale but warm, landing on the floor in thin lines. The girl woke before anyone else. She always did. Habit pulled her awake before safety could. For a moment, panic rose in her chest, sharp and fast, until she remembered where she was. The room was quiet. Too quiet. She turned her head slowly and saw the smaller child sleeping in the bed beside her, wrapped in clean blankets, cheeks pink instead of blue. His breathing was steady. Real daughter's shoulders dropped. She sat up and rubbed her eyes with the sleeves of the borrowed sweater she still wore. Everything smelled clean. Soap. Fresh air. Something warm cooking somewhere far away.
Oh.
It felt unreal, like a dream she might break if she moved wrong. She slid out of bed and padded across the cool floor to the window. Outside, the city looked different in daylight. Snow still covered the streets, but the sun made it softer, brighter. People moved slower now, less frantic than the morning before. Yesterday already felt far away. A knock sounded at the door. Gentle, she stiffened out of habit. Yes, the door opened slightly. The man stood there, a cup in his hand, another on a small tray. "Good morning," he said. She nodded. "He's still sleeping." "That's a good sign," he said softly. He set the tray down on a table near the door. Warm steam rose from the cups. "Something to drink," he said, "and food will be ready soon." "Thank you," she said, careful not to sound like she owed him something she couldn't repay. They stood there for a moment, unsure of what came next. Later, professionals returned. There were more conversations, more listening. People explained things slowly. Options, steps, time frames. The girl listened closely, asking questions when she didn't understand. She stayed beside the smaller child when he awoke, helping him drink and eat small bites, watching his color return like the world slowly painting itself back in. The man stayed present, without hovering. He spoke when needed. He listened more. Over the next days, attention came from directions the girl had never experienced. Medical checkups, new clothes that fit, a lot more meals that did not have to be saved for later. She accepted these things cautiously, waiting for them to disappear. They did not. News of what happened on that street traveled faster than she expected. Someone had taken a picture from far away. Someone else had told a story. The image of a small girl holding another child in falling snow struck a nerve. The man asked her if she was okay with attention before allowing anything to move forward. "No pictures," she said firmly. He agreed without hesitation. Still, people talked, not about her face, but about the moment, about what it meant, about who they were meant to be when faced with it. The man spoke publicly once, briefly. He did not share details. He did not tell her story for her. He said only that help should not depend on wealth or timing, that turning away was often a choice made to isolate. Then he went quiet again. For the girl, life changed slowly, not overnight, the way stories pretend it does. Stability arrived in steps. A safe place, school enrollment, doctors who spoke kindly, caseworkers who listened. Through it all, one thing stayed firm. She and the smaller child remained together. The first day she walked him into a classroom, her hand trembled more than his. He looked up at her with complete trust, smiled, and ran ahead. She stood there watching until someone reminded her it was okay to leave. She did not go far. She never did. The man checked in often, not with demands but with questions. Was she comfortable? Was anything missing? Was this working? When she said she wanted less attention, he arranged it. When she wanted school supplies, they arrived quietly. Months passed. Winter softened into spring. Snow melted into gray water along the streets. The bus stop where everything had changed looked ordinary again. People waited there every day, unaware of what had once happened. One afternoon, the girl asked to go back. The man did not ask why. He drove. They stood across the street together, watching buses come and go. She did not step closer. She didn't need to. I thought it would feel bigger, she said. Does it? He asked. No, she said after a moment. I think it already did what it came to do. He nodded. Time continued its steady work. The smaller child grew louder, stronger, more curious. The girl learned how to be more than just a protector. She learned how to be a child again in small ways. Laughing without checking exits, sleeping through the night, letting others help. It did not erase the past, but it loosened its grip. One evening, just after dinner, the man sat across from her at a simple table. I want to talk about the future, he said. Her body tensed, old fear stirring. I'm listening, she said. I want to support you long term, he said. Education, stability, choice, but not control. She studied him. Why? He answered honestly. I guess. Because you showed me something I forgot? Responsibility doesn't end at noticing. It begins there. She thought about that for a long time. Yes, she said finally. But I want to decide things too. He smiled, respectful. Exactly. The arrangement they found was simple, quiet, and strong. No announcement, no spotlight, just commitment. Years later, when people told the story, they focused on the moment in the snow, on the money, on the car. But the truth was simpler. A child had refused to let go. An adult had chosen not to look away. On a clear morning much later, the girl walked past that same bus stop on her way to school. She was taller now, stronger. Her steps were sure. She paused for just a second, not out of pain, but out of respect. Then she kept walking. The world moved. Around her, unaware that one small act of holding on had once shifted its direction. And somewhere not far away, a man looked at his busy calendar and smiled quietly. Knowing that the most important decision he had ever made never appeared on it at all, life did not slow down after things settled. It simply became fuller. Weeks turned into months, and the quiet routines grew stronger. The girl learned the sound of mornings that were not rushed by fear. Alarm clocks replaced sudden wake-ups. Warm water ran from taps without question. Meals arrived when they were supposed to. These things seemed small, but they reshaped her days. The smaller child changed the fastest. His laughter came easier now. He ran instead of shuffling. He slept without waking from bad dreams, and when he did wake, it was usually from excitement, not fear. He talked about school, about drawings on the wall, about friends whose names the girl practiced remembering because they mattered to him. She watched all of it closely. Part of her still waited for the ground to fall away. Stability felt like something borrowed. She treated it gently, afraid it might break. When people praised her strength, she did not know how to respond. Strength had never felt like a choice. It had been necessity. She smiled politely and changed the subject. The man checked in less often now, but only because he trusted the systems he helped put in place. When he did appear, it was not with solutions already decided, but with questions. "How are you really?" he asked once, sitting across from her at a small table. She thought about that for a long time before answering. "Learning," she said. He smiled, understanding more than she said. School brought new challenges. Books were harder than survival had been. Rules were confusing in different ways. Sitting still felt strange, but the girl worked harder than anyone noticed. She stayed late. She asked questions. She learned one afternoon, a teacher pulled her aside. She's remarkable, the teacher said to the counselor nearby. Not because of what she's been through, but because of how she responds. The girl heard only part of it, but it stayed with her. The past did not disappear. Sometimes it returned in flashes, a sudden cold wind, a crowded sidewalk, the sound of a bus braking. On those days, her chest tightened, and her hands shook. Someone noticed. You don't have to hold everything alone anymore, a calm voice reminded her. That sentence took time to believe. The man faced his own unease. The story followed him even when he tried to leave it behind. People called him generous. Some called him brave. Others questioned his motives. He did not argue with any of them. At night, when noise quieted, he replayed the moment he had almost driven away. The thought made him uncomfortable in a useful way. It reminded him that comfort could lie. So he began asking harder questions, not just about giving money, but about systems, about how many children stood unnoticed every day, about why help so often required crisis to be visible. Behind closed doors, he worked to shift things quietly, funding shelters, supporting education programs, asking for fewer cameras and more long-term plans. Most people never heard about it. He preferred it that way. One evening, months later, the girl did something unexpected. She raised her hand in class and volunteered to speak. The room went still. She talked about responsibility, about how sometimes children were asked to be adults, about how watching out for someone else could make you stronger, but it should never be forced. Her voice did not shake. Her classmates listened. Afterward, she felt lightheaded, not from fear, but from release. When she told the man later that day, he listened quietly. You don't owe anyone your story, he said. I know, she replied. I chose it, so that mattered. As the weather warmed, the city felt less sharp. Jackets grew lighter. Streets filled with sound. The bus stop disappeared beneath advertisements and new schedules. One afternoon, walking home together, the smaller child pointed to a snowless sidewalk. Was it really that cold? He asked. She looked at him, surprised. Yes, she said. It was. He nodded, accepting that past as something distant but real. They kept walking. The girl no longer measured every step. She began imagining what came next. Not just tomorrow, but years from now. College brochures arrived. Counselors spoke with her about goals. For the first time, the future felt like a place she might arrive intact. The man watched her growth from a careful distance. He resisted the urge to direct. He understood now that influence mattered most when it stepped back. One evening, they met for dinner. Simple food. No ceremony. You don't need me the same way anymore, he said quietly. No, she agreed. But that doesn't mean you disappear, he smiled. Good. I wouldn't want to. Later that night, she sat by the window and watched city lights blink on one by one. She thought about the weight she once carried and the space she carried now. She thought about the child she had. Then she thought about the choice someone else had made. Neither of them had known how far it would reach. That was the quiet. Truth change was not a single moment. It was what followed again and again. When people decided to stay present, outside, the city moved forward, unaware of the lives shifting quietly within it. Inside, a girl who once survived now planned, and that made all the difference. Time moved forward in a way that felt slow while it was happening and fast. When anyone tried to look back, the girl was no longer little. She had grown in quiet ways that photographs never fully showed. Her hands were stronger. Her eyes carried more thought. She spoke less than most people her age, but when she did, there was a steadiness that made others pause. The smaller child was taller now, running through hallways, laughing louder than he used to. He knew rules. He knew bedtime stories. He knew what safety felt like, even if he could not explain it in words. To him, warmth was a normal thing for the girl. Warmth was still something she noticed. School became harder as it became more important. Teachers asked questions about plans, careers, paths. Some students answered quickly. Others guessed. The girl listened. She learned that people often confused confidence with noise. She took on responsibility without being asked. Helped classmates who fell behind, stayed late to clean chalkboards, returned lost items without expecting thanks. These things came naturally to her. Responsibility had been her first language. One afternoon, a teacher stopped her after class. "You notice things?" the teacher said. The girl nodded, unsure how to respond. "There are programs that need people like you," the teacher continued. "Youth work, community service." The word service made something tighten in her chest. It sounded too much like survival. "Too close to the past, I'll think about it," she said. At home, the idea followed her. She watched the smaller child doing homework at the table, tongue poking out in concentration. She thought about how many people never had someone sit beside them and explain things. Twice she signed up. The program met once a week in a worn building near the city center. Old chairs, scuffed floors, walls covered with hopeful posters. The group was a mix of young people, all different, all carrying their own stories even if they didn't say them out loud. The girl didn't speak much at first. She listened. Listening had saved her once. Months passed. Slowly, the facilitator began asking her opinion. Others waited when she raised her hand. The room shifted almost without noticing. She spoke from experience, but never claimed authority. "I think people just want someone to stay," she said during one meeting. "Not fix things. Just stay." Heads nodded. Word traveled. Invitations came. Panels. Small meetings. Schools. She said yes to some and no to others. She learned that saying no was also a form of care. The man watched from a distance. He attended no events, gave no interviews. His support arrived quietly. Transportation, tuition forms. A short message before something important. "You don't owe anyone anything," one message read. She kept that one. As she grew older, questions of independence became sharper. She wanted space. Wanted to feel earned, not supported. One evening, she brought it up. "I want to try standing on my own more," she said. The man nodded without hesitation. Then we planned for that. They planned budgets, boundaries, backup plans that would never be used. Less needed. Trust replaced fear. The smaller child watched these discussions closely. Learned how adults could disagree without anger. How power could sit quietly. Teenage years carried storms of their own. Pressure, comparisons. Moments when the past tried to reuse old shapes. Someone at school made a joke about charity. "You get everything handed to you." They said. The girl paused, then replied calmly, "No, I was handed time." The conversation ended there. At night, doubts still came. She wondered if she was defined by one moment in the snow. If people saw her, or the idea of her, she wrote in a notebook. Not poetry, just facts. Things she had done, choices she had made. The list grew. The man faced his own changes. Wealth no longer thrilled him. Recognition felt flat. He found himself thinking more about outcomes than numbers. Winter returned again, softer this time. Snow fell without danger. Children played walking through the city one afternoon. The girl noticed a young mother struggling to carry groceries while holding a crying baby. Without thinking, she stepped in. "Let me help," she said. The relief on the woman's face said everything later that night. The girl realized something. She didn't feel small when helping anymore. Years passed. College applications arrived. Fear wrapped itself in envelopes. She opened each letter slowly. One acceptance stood out. A place known for social work, education, community leadership. She sat on the bed, letter in hand, breathing. The smaller child burst into the room. "You got in?" he asked. She nodded. He hugged her hard. Preparing to leave was harder than she expected. Leaving safety felt different than escaping danger. The man noticed her hesitation. "You can always come back," he said. "I know," she replied. "That's why I can leave." College life was unfamiliar. Noise, choice. Freedom. At first she felt invisible again. Then class discussions began. Her voice found space. Her experiences added weight without being Heavya professor once asked her to speak after class. You carry leadership differently, the professor said. I don't want to lead the girl, replied. That's usually who should, the professor answered. She joined study groups, volunteered at shelters, balanced academics with service carefully, so neither became a burden. Back home, the smaller child followed his own path. Sports, friends, they spoke often, shared jokes, gave advice. One winter break, she returned home. The city greeted her without ceremony. Walking downtown, she passed the street where everything had started years ago. The bench was gone. The corner looked ordinary. She stood there for a long moment. Nothing dramatic happened. She smiled and walked on that night. She told the man where she had gone. How did it feel? He asked. Like a chapter that doesn't control the book anymore, she replied. He nodded. The story continued, not loudly, not publicly, but honestly. And that was enough.